I live on a small family farm, and one of my recent projects was to build 5 chicken coops. We were looking to expand the egg production, the amount of eggs that we could sell. And so I needed to build 5 chicken coops. They need to be about 4 feet by 8 feet and preferably as mobile as possible. Now, the first one that I built ended up, I built it out of solid 2x4s, treated 2x4s mostly. And by the time I got through with it being 4 feet by 8 feet, solid 2x4s, tin roof, and some thin wood siding on it, it was extremely heavy, very difficult to move. So I knew that I needed to change some things. So the second one that I built, I took about 2/3 of the wood roughly and ended up cutting it in half. Now that decreased the weight by a lot, but it still wasn't as light as I really wanted it to be, nor was it as inexpensive as I wanted it to be. Using the solid 2x4s and some of the other materials, it came out to be quite expensive the first time around. But by the third, fourth, and fifth iterations of the chicken coops that I was building, I ended up getting them to where they were about half of the weight of the first one and pretty close to half of the cost as well. And in a lot of ways, the code that we write as developers can be like that first chicken coop. It can be very heavy, cumbersome, it can take a long time to write, and it can be very costly not only to write, but also to use on a website from a performance standpoint. And so as developers, we need to be looking to constantly improve our skills, our knowledge, our mindset. Obviously, the languages that we use, the platforms that we use, they are typically improving, and so we need to be keeping up with that. And so that's the focus of this question for this week, is the improvements that can be made from a brief code snippet and a pull request that we're reviewing. Now, before we get into the question, I do want to call out SwiftOtter.com. We have a lot of resources there that can be used for improving your own skills, whether it's working with Magento, some other options we have available there as well. And incidentally, we also have a book and a course on debugging. So you can figure out what is wrong with the code that you wrote the other night when you stayed up way too late. So check those out when you get a chance. There's likely some stuff there that can help you to improve. That is our goal. So now let's take a look at the question that we have. So you are reviewing a merge request and see the following code in the OtterService class. And so we have this code snippet. And so after reviewing that code snippet, what, if any, changes do you request? And so we'll take a look at the possible answers. A, change OtterService to OtterHelper to clarify that this is a helper class. B, the code is working, so it's not worth making any changes. Or C, use promoted properties and make OtterSession private. Now, before I go any further, I do want to say you probably have a little bit of additional sound effects in the background. We have a very large thunderstorm over me right now, so that is the reason for slightly different lighting as well as the background noises you're hearing. So the question that we have deals with a code review. Now, we know that code reviews are very important. They serve to help us adhere to company standards. They can take care of finding any mistakes, typos that we might make in the code that we write. And it also helps us to follow along with the best practices that we need to be aware of as developers. Reviewing the answers, we have the 3 different options, starting with option A, which again is to change OtterService to OtterHelper to clarify that this is a helper class. Because of Magento 2's shift, or really a push towards using more specific and a single responsibility focus in the architecture, there's really been kind of a turn-off from using the helper word in a class. Now, we still basically have classes that are helpers, but for clarity, we're not really calling them helper classes anymore. In this case, using the OtterService, using that service in there, is the best approach. Switching to a helper would not be a good recommendation. Using the service as part of that class name is more specific, and it makes the point that it's targeting specific tasks and logic. So this would not be a good recommendation. So we're going to rule option A out. Option B, the code is working, so it's not worth making any changes. Now I will say that there are certain instances where this could be the case. For example, I think a year or two ago, I had a problem that I needed to resolve, and it was occurring on the production site. So obviously it was something that needed to happen as quickly as possible. Due to the speed that I was trying to get this out with, the merge request that I had did have some minor improvements that I should have done. But the coworker that was reviewing the pull request realized that it wasn't super important, the code was working, that was what was necessary at this time, and so he flagged it up for me to fix later. So we got that merged, the problem on the production site was fixed, and I went back later and I took care of those improvements. So in some instances, the key factor to our code review could just be that the code works. We need to get it out as quickly as possible to fix a problem, and so we just need to make sure that it's working. Even if there's some minor things that could be improved, we might just kind of wink at that, save it for later. But for the most part, we can't have our standard being just that the code works. Our code needs to be written to the best of our ability, to the best of our knowledge, and again, we need to always be looking to improve. So when we have a merge request that we're reviewing, we need to be striving to be the best and write the best code that we can, and we can't have that standard of, oh, the code's working, let's just merge it. So that being the case, we're going to rule out option B as well, leaving option C as the last choice. Using promoted properties and making OtterSession private. Now this is a good option. This is going to remove some extra code, some extra lines, and it is going to utilize a feature that we have available in PHP 8. Now obviously, since Magento 2 started supporting PHP 8, that's given us access to a lot of really cool features, which probably one of my favorites is the promoted properties. I love the amount of space and time that can save. Obviously, we're all pretty well familiar with some of the Magento 2 core classes that have the hundreds of lines of constructor properties and so on. And using promoted properties is a great way to cut down on a lot of code that can just be annoying to get through. And so in this instance, we can take that promoted property and change it from looking like this to looking like this. We can switch that to a private SessionManagerInterface, OtterSession. We remove those extra lines, makes it a little bit clearer, easier to read, and that was a good call out in some of the answers I saw on LinkedIn. We can add read-only to this as well. And so in that case, we take several lines of code and we cut them down into this one line of code. Way more readable, quicker to kind of get an idea of what the class is doing. And again, in this instance, it is a few lines of code, just a small snippet, but in a lot of cases, this could be equating to hundreds of lines of code that are removed and a lot of space that is saved, and ultimately makes everything easier to read, easier to understand, and we're utilizing the resources that we have available in PHP 8. And so all of that being the case, I'm going to be selecting C as the correct answer. So out of our three options here, option C is correct. So we need to remember as developers to always be looking for ways to improve. There's always room to grow. There's always room to develop our experience and our understanding. And sometimes it's as simple as making sure that we are leveraging all of the resources that we have available to us in the platform, such as Magento, or the code language, such as PHP, that we are working with. So thanks for watching.